And what's up, folks? Matthew Bellman, Ryan Kostrowski. Again, I would like nothing more to be talking about DFS today, but we all know it's not a thing. We're in quarantine. This is boring, but at least we can talk about what we believe are the most overrated players in sports.
I'm just going to correct you. Sports is not a thing, but DFS is still a thing. I am definitely in these LOL streets. My buddy,
real DFS.
My buddy came over yesterday. I told you we hung out outside, but I had this minor league LOL in German streaming on my TV. My buddy couldn't believe it. And I said, what else is there? There's nothing else going on. So a couple of our customers, former customers I've been talking to, we've had fun conversations. These slates start at 2 a.m. and go to like 8 a.m. and I have trouble sleeping. So it's exciting. Yeah, that's my plug. So I'm excited to make this video with you.
Oh, man. I'm so desperate for things to do. Like, you saw my tweet last night. Like, I had no interest in drinking alcohol yesterday, but I was seriously like, I'm so bored. Do I just start drinking whiskey to cue the boredom? No, I didn't. I got to bed early again, so I'm feeling good again today. Who was the guy that did the push-ups? Bales, was it?
Yeah, Bales.
And you asked me if I could do, like, the push-up thing. I don't have no idea. Probably not the push-ups because my shoulder's been hurting. And
that's so ridiculous, too. I feel like that's like he's in real good shape. I told you about the other stuff he's done. I mean, 2,400 in 12 hours is, I would say, I don't want to say percentages, but like 100% most people could not do it.
Yeah, so 200 an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, even if my shoulder hadn't been hurting me, I'm pretty sure I couldn't do that. I think for me, like if I wanted to do something like that, it would be more along the lines of, can I run 30 miles in 24 hours or something like that?
For sure.
And I'm actually sitting here like thinking about what I could do on that side just to like bring in some form of entertainment for you guys to laugh at me or just for something to do, because I feel like we're all really freaking bored.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I do something like that too. And I will say you made up a good point when we talked about, the 6, 12, 18, 24 challenge. Like, I think it was like 18 donuts in there or 24 donuts. That is, I mean, I don't even think that sounds hard to do in a day. But when you put it with other stuff, especially really physical activities, it makes it really hard. Or it makes the physical activities really hard if you like eat the donuts. So I'm with you.
Yeah, Mike, I can run 6 miles like that. That's easy for me. I can do that any day. Waking out of bed with a hangover, I can run 6 miles. I could drink 18 beers in a day, no problem, no questions about it. Now, I couldn't drink 18 beers and then run 6 miles. And I think the other one, did you say you did like beat off 9 times or something?
12 to completion.
I'm almost 40 years old. I don't even know if I could have done that as a teenager. So,
there's no point in my life I could have ever done that. That might actually be the most
impossible.
I'm like the most impressive out of all the things he's done.
Yeah. Anyways, that's crazy. All right. So we're here to talk about our most overrated athletes. Again, a couple of like ways to set this up. This is of our lifetime. I'm 39. You're 34, 35, 36?
35.
35. So really, you're kind of thinking of like the mid 80s and beyond. So guys in the 70s aren't going to count because we never watched them play. We can't evaluate guys like that. So that's that time period. Also, I want to reiterate this. Like, a lot of the guys on my list are really good players. And I'm not saying that they're not good players. I'm just saying that when they're ranked above, like as greats of all time, when the truth is they're just really good and we're on a good team and stuff like that, just to set up. Like, again, we'll get into a couple of these dudes. They're still really good. They're just not as good as a lot of people think they are.
I figured you'd go. I mean, I know a lot of guys are going to be on your list. So,
well, why don't you start us off then? Okay,
I'm going to start it off with a guy. He's actually the first guy that came to my mind. Not really like, not really a guy that people will think about too often when they think about the athletes of again, the past 20, 30 years. But he did win a Cy Young, and I miss baseball. So I'm starting off with Rick Porcello right here as my most overrated guy. Again, he doesn't fit into the category of he's great but overrated. He's not awful, but that's what makes him overrated. Is he's not awful, but he's far from great. No reason he should have won a Cy Young. Just noteworthy candidate that year. Got another decent contract from the Mets this year, so now going to be in that rotation. I just think he's a guy. He's a big name. He's living off that 1 year. He got a big deal in Boston. If Rick Porcello isn't overrated, I don't know who is.
And see, that's where like this is so subjective because I don't think of him as overrated because I don't think anybody thinks he's good besides you. Like I know you don't think he's good, but like who does think Rick Porcello is good? I get like the Mets make tons of mistakes. So again, maybe they paid him too much, but what have the Mets done right in recent memory? So like, I don't really think of him as being overrated because I don't think of other people thinking of him as good.
Fair enough. And again, that's why it is hard to make this list without, taking really good, at least good, if not really good to great players, because if they're not, then they're not really overrated. So you go ahead.
All right, so you've been very cocky and confident since we got on here, and I think you should be because I'm sure you're probably right that you're going to be able to guess a lot of these guys. Pick one person that you think is on my list, and let's see if you get it right, and then I'll tell you why I think he is.
Derek Jeter.
Number one, baby. So Derek Jeter is a very, very good baseball player, right? Like, I don't want to pretend like I think he's a scrub or he's trash, or I think he's anything like that. But I've been very outspoken about the fact that I think he's extremely overrated by people. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, he's a New York Yankee. This is one of, if not the most prestigious organization in all of sports, or at least sports that we follow. So you're automatically in the media capital of the world going to get more attention than you probably deserve. Two, and in the most heterosexual way possible, he's a good-looking dude who is all-time great when it comes to the tail that he's pulled, right? Like, no questions about it. Derek Jeter's list of, like, female accomplishments, that's, to me, where, like, maybe he's underrated because he's the man. Again, we would all love to live. I think because I've been rewatching Entourage, how Turtle looks at Vince. That's how most men look at Derek Jeter. Like, I'd love to just be him for 24 hours one day. He's awesome right there. Now, where he gets overrated is people, like, talk about him as, like, oh, he's the greatest Yankee of all time. Like, no, he's not. Like, not even close. Mariano Rivera, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Mickey Mantle. There's a long list of guys who are better Yankees than he is. He was a good baseball player, but even in his prime, he was maybe a slightly above average defensive shortstop. He's not an MVP. He's a good base stealer. Not great. He's not a power hitter. The only thing he really did great, in my opinion, was he hit for average. He's got a very good lifetime career average. And people talk about him like he's this great postseason player. And I don't want to say he's not a good postseason player, but when he was young, those late 90s Yankees teams were awesome. They were great teams, but he gets way too much credit for all those wins. And I think, to me, still the most overrated play of all time is him taking a bad cutoff throw and tossing it to the guy. Like, that's what you're supposed to be. As a guy who grew up playing catcher for, 10 years and watching where everybody's supposed to be set up, he did what he was supposed to do. It was a good play, but people talk about it like it was, the greatest, catch or whatever you might want to call it of all time. He's a very good player, but he's not a top 5 Yankee even of all time. There are people who will make the argument that he's the greatest.
He's not the greatest Yankee of all time, but just some counter arguments to you right here. He is the all-time Yankees leader in hits, doubles, games played, stolen bases, times on base, plate appearances, and at-bats. Now,
I got at least 4 guys on my list that a lot of their arguments are because of longevity, including a Green Bay Packer that we'll get into. Longevity does not necessarily equal greatest.
But it matters, though, because what's the best ability? Availability. And he was there for the whole time. I mean, again, you're right. The reason he has the most hits and the most plate appearances is because he played for a long time. But, again, it works both ways. The reason that he played so long is because he got so many hits, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. So, again, I don't disagree with you, but I don't fully agree with you either because, he is the face of that Yankees team for better or for worse.
He did have some big clutch hits. I cannot take those away from him. But one of them was an out that was miscalled. That they called it a home run, and it wasn't. He had a 310-foot fly ball that the guy reached over the stands and, grabbed it. That was not a real home run.
Yeah, but I feel like we can't really go back and talk about plays like that because umps and refs affect so many different plays and teams and games. Again, I don't disagree with you. I had Jeter on my list, but I definitely don't feel as strongly about it as you do. We freeze?
Yeah, we did. So, and that's part of this whole list is I think this comes up with for everybody. Not everybody overrates Derek Jeter. There's a lot of people that agree with me, and there's a lot of people that agree with you on more of a watered-down version of it. But he's got like a cult following.
Yeah, I was just
25% of people think he's like some sort of baseball god. And we talked about Craig Biggio the other day in underrated baseball players. Statistically, these guys are almost the same player. It just so happens that one played for a great Yankees team. And then after those first couple years, like Jeter, what did he do? Like in, his last 15 years of his career from a postseason perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I know you've mentioned that in the past, and I have no argument for that, but he does have 5 rings, and I know they were great teams, but still can't take that away from him.
Nope, no doubt about it. Okay, so again, I'm sure there'll be some people, we might even get a thumbs down just for that opinion because he's got a lot of love. And again, love to be Derek Jeter for a day. That would be an awesome day, and I would have a great time doing it, but that doesn't make him a better baseball player.
Agreed.
Where are you going next, where are you going next, my man?
All right, so another guy that he's not great at all, but I think he's overrated for a lot of the reasons that we talk about in DFS, and that's Hassan Whiteside. So puts up really good numbers, blocks a lot of shots, is a DFS dream when he's playing well. However, I don't consider him a great NBA player by any means. I think he's overrated for the numbers he puts up. He's bad defensively. He really hurts his team defense. He's never been on any sort of winning teams. You see how good the Heat are without him, and I know they have Jimmy Butler, but that was addition by subtraction for them, in my opinion. Again, I just think he's overrated. And I went more with guys that are like kind of average to good. I have a couple studs on my list, and he fits in that category.
Sure, because I would say he's a slightly above average NBA player, but specifically within our DFS community, there are people that see those numbers that probably think he's good. He's not. He's not a very good. He's a 6 on a scale of 10.
He was talking about, before the season ended, that he should be in consideration for Defensive Player of the Year. If he's saying that, like, how do you think people who just look at the numbers think,
I mean, I should be in consideration for defensive player. I mean, we can all say it about ourselves. It doesn't make it true. I wasn't even a top 5 defensive player on my intramural team with that 8 people. So, like, yeah, I mean, you can say it, but it's not true. So, not a guy I would have thought of because we run in the DFS circle. So there are probably some people that see those numbers that think he's better than he is. But I don't really think of him like people treating him with that much respect.
Okay, I get that.
So, again, these are all so subjective that it is a difficult thing to talk about. But I'm sure there are people out there who think he's good.
Mm-hmm. All right, you want me to continue guessing?
Yeah, why don't you guess on another one?
Bryce Harper.
Yeah, number 4. So, funny story. My daughter's name is Harper, and I've been making this list for a couple days because we've talked about doing this video, and she's like, Daddy, what is this? And I'm like, it's a list of baseball players. She goes, then why is my name on it? And I'm like, oh, well, honey, there's actually a very overrated baseball player named Bryce Harper. She's like, oh, I get it. So it was almost hard for me to put Bryce Harper on this list. And can you guess why that is?
You said it was hard for you to put Harper on this list?
Yeah. Do you know why that might be? Let's see if you can guess this.
It was hard for you to put Harper on this list because he's not done yet?
No, because I feel like his status within the baseball world has taken a big hit the last year or two. So, like, I don't think he's as overrated as I think he was a year ago.
He's not. I mean, you're right, guys. You're right. I mean, it's no question people would rather have, like, the Acuñas of the world over him. So
sure. Like, and again, like, the whole Trout or Harper narrative is, like, it's now, I think, if you ask 100 people, it would be 99 Trouts and one person just being a jerk.
I just know you couldn't have this list without Jeter, Harper, and Kyrie Irving.
I almost skipped Kyrie, too, for the very same reason. We'll get to him in a little bit. But that is what – so, if this had been a year ago, I think Bryce Harper would have been my number 1. And he fell out a little bit because I think with the Nationals winning the World Series without him, it definitely opened up people's eyes to the reality and the truth that Bryce Harper is just not that great of a baseball player. He's a good baseball player. It's going to go down as probably one of the worst contracts in baseball history. He's a good baseball player with one great year, but he comes with a lot of like sexy name factor where people wanted him to be great. He's just not a great player. He's good. He's a good baseball player, not great.
Again, one that I don't disagree with you on, but I don't fully agree either because if you look at his numbers, a lot of his, what's the word I'm looking for? If you dig into the numbers more, I guess I should say, like his numbers, some of his numbers are still elite in terms of like his swinging strike percentage, like all that stuff. So if he has another like monster year this year, I don't think anyone would be surprised.
I would be a little surprised.
I wouldn't be. I mean,
I've seen one great. His MVP year was great. Okay. I cannot take that away from him. He was great that MVP year, and he has stretches of greatness. But he's a guy who goes into these long ruts of like months of being unproductive.
We're gonna go kind of a little cross sports right here. It's obviously comparing apples to oranges, but if I had to bet on one of these guys who is going to win an MVP or multiple, Bryce Harper or Devin Booker, I'm taking Harper.
I think it's easier to win the MVP in baseball because, like Matt Carpenter a couple years ago, you can get insanely hot for like 2 months and you can ride those statistically. Whereas, like in basketball, you know, we've talked about this. We've talked about the NBA.
Yeah.
Like LeBron James should have 12 MVPs. The only reason he does it because the voters want to spread it out a little bit.
Well, you also have to be one of the elite teams in the NBA.
Right. You have to be a top 5 player. But in baseball, like your boy Rick Porcello, he ain't a top 5 pitcher. He just happened to have a good year when everybody else was down. And you can do that in baseball. Basketball, that's almost impossible.
All right, good point.
So, okay. Why don't you go next?
So a guy that I have on here, and again, kind of like Harper, he's fallen off a little bit, and I hate that I have this guy on here, but it's just the truth. It's Karl-Anthony Towns.
Oh, yeah.
So he's just overrated because he is awful defensively. His offensive game is amazing. He's one of the most talented offensive big men I've ever seen, but he clearly hasn't bought in defensively. He clearly hasn't bought into team culture. You know, whether it's he's with that bad Timberwolves culture, and that might be true, but at some point, if you're that good, you have to turn around the culture. Because like the Cavs were never a great culture, but LeBron came in and did his thing. You know,
I'll pause you for 1 second because I just want to make sure I get this point out. Basketball to me is the one sport, and quarterbacks a little bit, where you can equate winning to a superstar because you can't in baseball because Mike Trout, Ken Griffey Jr., and Barry Bonds are arguably the 3 greatest outfielders in my lifetime. And they have 0 rings.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so keep going. I just want to make sure I remember to say that.
No, it's true. And he is considered, I mean, as recent as a year ago, a year and a half ago, you know, in the GM polls, he was, you know, getting votes ahead of Giannis as the guy that you'd want to build around. Now, obviously, that's not the case anymore. No one would say that. But he's still considered an elite young talent, a guy that, you know, the Timberwolves would never deal. And I'm not sure he's that guy. And I love him. He's amazing offensively, but he doesn't win. Not only does he doesn't win, like Minnesota sucks, and they've always sucked.
I actually love that you put him on there because I think for like 2 years now, we've argued about him. And again, DFS and real life are different, clearly. But I've never been a big Karl-Anthony Towns guy. And part of that might be because you're such a big college basketball fan compared to me that like you watched how good he was in college and you've seen like the offensive talent, but he does not equate to winning in the slightest.
No, he doesn't. That's a factual statement. I have nothing for that.
Yeah, okay, cool. I love that you put him on the list because when you watch guys in the NBA, it's the only sport where I ever want to hear about wins equaling who you are as a baseball player. Mike Trout is amazing, and this guy can't even sniff the playoffs. It ain't his fault.
That goes into like the whole MVP like you just talked about. Numbers matter more in baseball because, like,
for sure,
you know, it's just more of a numbers game. Like,
yeah, it's more one-on-one matchups.
Say this too. Like, unless Phoenix is good, Booker's not winning an MVP. I mean,
no, and he might need a culture change as well.
Right. And that's just and that's the NBA though, because that's just, you know, NBA is tough, obviously.
Yeah, and I think the best argument you've ever made against him is you're like, how is he going to beat Luka? And how is he going to beat this guy? And how is he going to beat Giannis to win that? And I'm like, that's something I can't answer because it's a great point that I can't really argue with you.
Because it's fun to talk about, if nothing else.
All right, only because I'm going to jump down my list. He's a little bit further down, but just because you mentioned him, let's just briefly touch on Kyrie Irving. So I've been saying for years how overrated I think Kyrie is, well before last year in Boston too. And that's same with like the Bryce Harper thing. Now with Boston being so much better without him, it's hard to look at him as overrated because he's had another bad injury season where the Nets have been better without him. I cannot take away the shot against Golden State. Great shot, one of the greatest shots in NBA history. He had some really nice offensive games in that series as well. But Kyrie Irving just does not make basketball teams better.
I think I don't disagree that he's overrated. I disagree that he doesn't make teams better. And I recently just watched like the last 3 games of that series against Golden State.
He was very good, and I want to say, I want to make sure I give him
very
credit.
good.
He was very good.
Amazing. Yeah. If he's not there, not just because of the shot, we don't win a title. And when you're talking about a series with LeBron James, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, said he might have been the best player on the court. I mean, that says a lot.
He was excellent in that series. Besides the shot, he had some great moments. Yeah.
The other thing which makes Kyrie overrated is just who he is. He's a headache. Part of why he's made, Boston's better with him leaving is not just because of his talent, but because the guys seem happier. And that does mean something. I think that he's overrated, but I'm very biased and still appreciate what he's done because I know how hard it is to get any sort of title, and he is a massive reason why we got one.
All right, and this is what happens a lot in basketball, and there's another guy that I'll get into here in a little bit, is oftentimes your eyes lie to you when you watch the game, and you watch a guy with handles like his who can knock it down from 30 routinely. They got his shot, and it's also very impressive when a little guy can dominate a big guy game like that. So our eyes watch that, and you're like, God, man, he's incredible because ball skills, he's amazing.
I was going to say, speaking of his ball skills, I see a lot of like former NBA players now that say like best handles ever, Kyrie Irving. That means something too. Again, that doesn't mean he's a great player. No one would ever say Kyrie or LeBron. He's not like that. And it's funny. Years ago, when Kyrie was in Cleveland, I've always been a huge Damian Lillard fan. You know that. I love Dame. I would even say to my buddies, I'd prefer Dame to Kyrie. I just think he's better. And now, I don't think anyone would argue that. Like, everyone would take Dame over Kyrie. Don't you agree?
Yeah, no question about it. I don't even think there's an argument to be made on that one. Again, Kyrie's ball skills, his shooting, his ability to finish amongst the trees for a little guy, again, they're amazing. But much like Derrick Rose in his prime, like, it's a really cool skill to have, but it does not equate to winning at the NBA level with any kind of consistency. And it's not a way to build a team. And it's fun to watch, and it's impressive. Now, as like normal guys, like playing basketball with your buddies, like I can't beat anybody off the dribble. So I'm impressed when I watch a guy like him with handles like that can finish among the trees. Because even though I can like play a game and pick up basketball competitively with my friends, it's because I can rebound and I can shoot a little bit. But like I've never understood how somebody can do what he does with the ball. And I think it's amazing. But he just doesn't equate to winning in a team sport with any type of consistency.
You're right. Yeah, that is a definite. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. And let's not pretend like when he was in Cleveland before, like they were not good.
They were awful.
Yeah. So they had the number one pick. That's how Anthony Bennett came along. So, yeah, I mean, he is always hurt. Like he was hurt at Duke. He was hurt. I mean, so that's an issue. But I will say, I also agree with kind of the Bryce Harper effect that he's not as much overrated because a lot of people feel that about him now. If this was a year ago, he'd be higher on the list.
Oh my God, 2 years ago, he'd have been way up there. But you're right, because people have opened their eyes to the truth on this guy. Like in this season in Brooklyn. Yeah, he's unlikable. Boston is so much better without him. It is hard to think of him as overrated, but there is still like 20% of the people out there that hold on to like this love of him because his handles are sick. I will not take that away from him. His handles are unreal.
No doubt about it.
All right, who do you got next, buddy?
All right, so going with another big man. And again, I don't like that I'm bringing this guy up because he's a new member of the Cavs, but it's Andre Drummond. So
not about him.
Not like a superstar by any means. Not like a guy that's going to, like not a Derek Jeter type guy. But he's overrated just because his prowess comes from how big he is, how good of a rebounder he is, how massive he is inside. When you look at the number, well, a couple things on that. So one, he doesn't have much basketball skill. And I think that speaks volumes. Like, he's just not that skilled at all.
I'll give him this. He's not a terrible passer for a big man.
He's not a terrible passer, and he can dribble like a tad, but he's got, very minimal skill. Compared to other guys in the NBA, his skill is laughable. And when you look at his rebounding numbers, and I was doing this because I wasn't sure I wanted him to be on my list. He's an amazing rebounder. He grabs a ton of rebounds. But interestingly enough, when he's off the court, his team rebounds like at basically the same, if not slightly higher. Now, that could be due to a bunch of different factors, but I think that raises some red flags. And I think he's a guy that puts up numbers. He's never won. He's never been any, He's never been a guy that you would want to build around, but he still like gets paid like a max player. I think he's just, overrated. I don't know how else to put it. What do you think?
He's specifically overrated because we run with the DFS community,
yes. Right? A lot of my list was based on that because we talk about that a lot.
Okay, so I think within NBA junkie circles, and we can have conversations in either one of them because of how much sports we watch. I don't think he's that highly regarded.
You're right.
But within the DFS community, where numbers can oftentimes be confused for talent and ability to win, he's probably very overrated.
So you've got, when Detroit gave him up for basically a bag of peanuts just to get him out of town so he wouldn't pick up the option, you've got basically the whole NBA telling you that he's not overrated because they don't rate him at all because they don't want him. Yep. But then you've got all the people after that deal is made. Like, how stupid are the Pistons? Like, they dealt away their best player, like their franchise player. He's overrated to those people.
Yeah, for sure. So I think he's the opposite point in. Yeah, we were talking then when Brook Lopez signed with Milwaukee. I had recently read an article that talked about how Brook Lopez, most people think of him as not being a good rebounding big man. Because they're like, look at his rebounding numbers for a guy who's 7'1". They're not good. And I just happened, freak coincidence, hadn't researched it, run across an article on Twitter about how Brook Lopez, every team that he plays for, when he's on the court, their team rebounding numbers go up because of the way he boxes out. It's a different strategy for how they rebound with Brook Lopez on the court. Now, Andre Drummond will have, at the end of the year, his rebounds per game might be double what Brook Lopez's are, but that doesn't make the team better.
No, it doesn't. So, again, he's just a guy, a max player that's overrated. And I think he's not bad. I mean, I like him on the Cavs. He's again, he offers a lot of things, and he's still got value because, again, he's that much bigger than other guys inside.
Do you know what team screams offering him a max contract?
The Knicks.
Fuck yeah, man. Absolutely. That's the kind of move that Dolan would make right there. Oh, let's give this guy max money. Look at his rebounds. And then they would just make them suck for another 5 years.
I thought about putting Blake Griffin on this list, and I think he's a perfect candidate for this list.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even thought about him, to be honest with you. Again, I feel like right now he's not rated.
True.
So he doesn't come to my mind.
True.
Okay. Well, since we've been talking a lot of basketball, I'm going to hit up another basketball player. This guy's been retired for 5 to 10 years. I can't remember exactly. I've brought him up before. Can you guess who it is?
He's been retired for 5 years or so.
5 to 10. I can't remember exactly how many it is. And it reminds me a lot of Kyrie Irving.
Oh, Allen Iverson?
Yes, absolutely. And again, it's the same type of your eyes lie to you type of scenario. And what it is when you watch his handles and you watch his ability, what is the guy, 5'11", 170 pounds or something?
Yeah.
What he's able to do without that, he can't shoot that well. And his ability to finish among the trees, guys, I think it's incredible. I think it's an amazing skill. And the dude's he weighs 25 pounds less than me, and he's my height. The fact that he can go in among these 7-foot athletes and make shots consistently, I think is amazing. But superstars like that, it matters if you win. He went to one NBA Finals. They got their butts kicked, and they should because the Lakers team was so much better. And he did not have the supporting cast to beat them. I'm not holding that against him. But for the rest of his career, I mean, this is not a guy that makes his teammates better. He's got the ball in his hand. Now, his skill set is amazing, especially for his size, but he's just not a guy that translates to winning on the court with any kind of consistency.
So it's tough. I get all your points. A lot of them hold true. And it is similar to Kyrie. The only thing that I give Iverson, and Kyrie's got the ring. So ultimately, I think that gives Kyrie the edge. But Iverson is like a cultural icon, right? Sure. He is a guy that came to the NBA. He changed the way players dressed. He changed the way guys dressed across the country. He's still looked at in that regard.
Do you get wins for that?
No, he does not get wins for that.
Okay. That's just how it's subjective. We evaluate it a little bit differently.
Right. So, I think about his crossover on Jordan. I think about, when he played at Georgetown, how good he was. He was kind of a guy that he transcended the league a little bit. Again, he's another one where I don't disagree with you, but I don't fully agree with you either. Very impressive to make that finals. The East was bad, but it's not like he had good guys that he was playing with either. No. I mean, he was his whole team. So again, I get why you went there. I figured you'd go there. It took me a second to guess it, but yeah, cool.
I mean, you look at him moving over to Denver and then to Detroit and stuff like
He
that.
was
Like the
not
twilight
good.
of his career was pathetic.
He was not good after he left Philly.
No, like again, like you said, he was in a weak East. He made it to the finals once. He did not have great teammates. I'm not going to pretend like Eric Snow was this like difference maker that he was running with Pippen as his running mate or anything like that. But I also spend a lot more time on social media than you do reading comments because I'm posting videos everywhere all the time. And like I see all the time, Iverson's better than LeBron. Iverson was better than Kobe. Like, what did you smoke? Give me some of it because I'd love to try it. No, he's like better than LeBron. You've got to be kidding me. LeBron takes terrible teams to the finals religiously. LeBron is, I don't know, for me, he's the second best basketball player of all time. But I will regularly see people put like AI above LeBron, above Kobe, above Tim Duncan. Like, no.
I put AI in the same level as like Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady.
Oh, well, if you rate him there, sure. And I have T-Mac above Vince personally, but yes. I'll take T-Mac over Iverson, too.
I feel like T-Mac's career was the shortest out of all of them. Like,
yeah. And that's hard where, like, you can rate people due to injuries.
There's no doubt, though, out of all those guys, he was the best pure scorer. I mean, he might be the best pure scorer I've ever seen. Like, right there with James Harden.
I did watch Michael Jordan a lot growing up. He was pretty good, too. All right. But, yeah, no, you're right. T-Mac was his little run for a few years is pretty incredible, but his career was too short to go up there as all-time greats. And, again, no rings to rest on and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you got next?
I'm sticking with the NBA theme. I'm sticking with current guys. Again, kind of in the same mold. He's not even considered as good as Whiteside or Drummond. I just think a lot of times because of the market they're in, and this guy fits that category well, they become overrated. And the guy I have here is Kyle Kuzma, who I just don't think is really that good at all. I get it. He's the best. He's the best Lakers young piece. But what does that mean? I just don't think he's that good of an NBA player. But people look at him like a stud in the making, a guy that the Lakers don't want to deal.
And this might have been different to talk about a year ago, too, because his year's been so terrible with AD around that I don't really think of him as being rated right now.
Okay, yeah, it's a different situation with AD there. But I had the trade deadline in my mind. You know, people talking like, oh, they can't give up Kuzma because he's their best young talent. And, like, I get all that. Like, you don't want to give away your best young talent. But, like, when it's Kuzma, if you're planning on when LeBron and if AD leaves, if Kuzma is your best player, you might be the worst team in the league.
All right, so what I want to take that as almost like into an off subject for a second, where I think a lot of people miss the boat when evaluating players. And this goes for DFS watchers, NBA fans, and executives all put together. It's like a year ago, a lot of people are like Kuzma's the best young piece. And right now, you're like, you look at Brandon Ingram as like the second coming of Kevin Durant. Like, yeah, I think you screwed the pooch on that one right there. Even Lonzo Ball looks like a better. Julius Randle, going back 2 years ago, looks like a better young piece.
They all look better.
So it's interesting because this can go up and down. It's like always a fluid conversation.
It's funny. It's like baseball cards are very similar. It's like 1 year, it's the exact same thing. So go on. Who do you got next?
All right, I'm actually going to skip down my list to the bottom only because we're talking about the Lakers and we've been talking about big men. We've been talking about basketball. With my last basketball player on the list, Anthony Davis.
Okay, go on.
So we've talked about him a lot. And what's interesting is with this year on hiatus due to coronavirus and not knowing, are we getting more regular season games? Are we getting postseason? Are we getting nothing? Who really knows? It really would have changed the narrative for Anthony Davis. And ultimately, I think pairing up with LeBron's probably going to be one of the greatest things that ever happened to him for his career. But numbers and eye test does not really equated to him putting up any type of winning consistency as far as the NBA goes. Again, excellent defensive player, and at times has looked like a really, really good offensive player. He disappears. He specifically disappears in big moments. And if you take out that one series against the Portland Trailblazers, this guy's got one playoff win in his career. I mean, the Pelicans have consistently missed the playoffs. He's not a guy that seems to make his teammates better or anything like that. Again, you watch him play, you're like, this guy's incredible. Because when he gets hot, he looks so good. He leaves games consistently. The DFS community knows all about that. I look at NBA players as the one guys who can really influence their team into how they win. And, like, I can't discredit baseball players. Like, Ken Griffey Jr. is one of the best I've ever seen. He's got no rings, but I don't blame him. Like when you watch an NBA player who's supposed to be a stud, he's like 6 years into his NBA career with one playoff series win. Like, I'm not impressed.
So this is to be determined, but you're right. He's definitely overrated. I'm 100% on board with this. You know how I feel about this. He's got a ton of talent. I mean, as much talent as maybe anyone in the league, but that doesn't mean that he's there yet or he'll ever get there. To be determined. I want to see like how he plays in the playoffs, if there's a playoffs this year, et cetera. But based on right now, the love that he gets, overrated for sure.
Yeah, and part of that has to do with DFS because we get monster DFS numbers. The other one is when he's playing up to his ability,
Right.
he looks like the game-changing guy out on there. The other thing I will say about him, though, as opposed to like your boy LeBron, like LeBron has got this uncanny ability to make his teammates better. I don't see that with Anthony Davis. I don't see that. It doesn't translate to making his guys around him any better. Where like the great players in the league, like with LeBron, it's his ability to pass. Like Kawhi, like is like that silent assassin, like just like his leadership for how he like plays defense and how he something about him, his teammates seem to rally around him.
Although I'm interested there too, because like we've talked about, how good is Kawhi really? I know he had that great playoffs last year, but we've talked about that a lot. I think he could potentially be on this list.
I mean, interested to see where the rest of his career goes.
So right now, though, we'll just talk about it. People consider him, you have some people say he's the best player in the game right now. Well, that's just not true. So a couple just, points to pick at there. Last year he had a great playoffs, but it wasn't like he was so dominant. He had a really good few weeks, and he was awesome. He also got Golden State without Durant. So if Durant plays, but Klay Thompson doesn't get injured, does he have that title?
And my Bucks choked, and Budenholzer got out-coached.
And you talked about how he was far from the Spurs' best player going into that series with the Heat.
He was the best player in the finals, though.
He was, but people talk all the time about how he shut down LeBron in that series. LeBron still averaged like 38 and 6 in that series. So he wasn't shutting down LeBron. He just played very well. And again, he definitely hampered and really helped the Spurs win. And that was kind of his launching point. But he is not close, in my opinion, to like the LeBron James, Michael Jordans of the world. And I think he's tough. What?
Career-wise, no. I would say this, though. If you had first pick and we're drafting playground teams and all we're doing is going out to win a game today, and you got the first overall pick in the NBA, and you're like, all right, Bellman, you're up. We're running 5-on-5. And you don't pick again for 60 players. Are you going with LeBron James right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Who would be your second guy?
Giannis.
Okay. And you know how much I love Giannis. But I would struggle because of his inability to hit mid-range shots with consistency. I would probably pick Kawhi over Giannis right now to win one game.
The other point is how good Toronto is without Kawhi.
It's a good point.
Really good.
It's a great point.
This falls into like what you talked about. I'm not going to try to sit here and say Kawhi isn't awesome. I mean, to your question that you just asked me about when he would get picked, regardless, he'd get picked in the top 5 for sure. So that says
top 3. In
that
most scenario.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Now, over 5 years, some people might be scared by the injuries and might drop off. But if we're just going to win a game tomorrow, I mean, I think Giannis and LeBron and Kawhi are the top 3 picks.
It's interesting. Where do you put Durant when he's back in there?
That's tough. Without knowing about how he is coming off of an injury, he's an older guy. He's in his 30s, coming off of a major injury. I would have to watch him play. Because if everybody was 100%, I mean, the arguments for Durant number 1 are real.
For sure. So, all right, just a fun little tangent. The next guy...
we have time to talk about this stuff.
We sure do. The next guy really pains me to bring him on the list, kind of like Towns. I've always been a fan of him. Has carried me in fantasy seasons when he used to be underrated. But now, especially like last year, going into the year before, and that's my man Giancarlo Stanton, who is getting paid massive buco bucks by the Yankees. Big thing for him. One of the big things for him, I should say, is he can't stay healthy. But the other thing, he hasn't adjusted to major league pitching, it seems, as well as other guys. And what I mean by that is, I can't remember who we were talking about that talked about gets really hot, but he's another guy that like he falls. Yeah, he falls is much like that, and I had them listed together. He falls in these slumps where he's just awful. And talk about not carrying your team. He's a hindrance on your team for weeks at a time. And to be considered one of like the best hitters, one of the best power hitters in the game, you can't do that. He's overrated still.
Okay, so I will not disagree with you. I thought about him. I went back and I looked up all of his numbers, and they were better than I remembered. He'd also played more games than I'd remember. Now, it's hard also because I don't feel like he's rated right now because I feel like we haven't seen him in so long.
Right, I get that.
I don't disagree with you, though, because I definitely was looking at him closely to put on this list.
And it is one MVP. I mean, he hit a ton of home runs.
And you're right. It's another one of those guys, just like Bryce Harper. When he gets hot and you watch him, and the home runs that he hit that go 600 feet, and that's a skill that baseball was my first love. And when I watch a guy hit a ball 475 feet, I am just in awe of it, even more so than when I see a Kyrie Allen Iverson type of handle. Obviously, I can't do anything like that on any sport, so like I always think they're super cool. But like when I see a guy hit a baseball 500 feet, I am envious. I am in awe of it, and he has that ability to do it. He's built like a Greek god or whatever you want to call him. He's just absolutely just stacked with muscles. He
is another guy. He's never been able to stay healthy though. Some freak injuries. He's been hurt with the Yankees a lot. I remember he got hit a couple times when he was with the Marlins. He looks like he is a specimen. He's one of the most physical I don't know what the correct wording for that is, of guys in all sports. And that's impressive coming from a guy in baseball.
Did you see the Blake Griffin when he roasted Alec Baldwin? Did you happen to catch that?
I did, but I feel like it's been a while.
I'm just thinking of like when Blake Griffin looks at Adam Carolla, he goes, Adam Carolla looks like a guy that calls black athletes thoroughbreds. And that's what I'm thinking of right now when you called him a specimen. And that's all I can think of is Blake Griffin kind of talking about Adam Carolla's a little racist and whatnot.
I don't really love him. I hate Adam Carolla's voice, so I don't think he's that fun.
All right. So I feel like we've hit up a bunch of the guys you knew I was going to talk about. And now we're going to get into, I think, a few more that I know a couple of them you'll probably disagree with. And I'm going to start with, let's see here. Which one makes sense to go with? I'm going to go with Buster Posey. And I felt like you might really disagree with that one because he does have a bunch of rings. However,
I really disagree with that one. I'm just going to say that right now.
However, I went back to look up a lot of these things because I was really interested. One, as a catcher, I value your defense a lot. He has 1 Gold Glove. Okay. His MVP season was really, really good. I'm going to give you that. Now, the guy's hit over 20 home runs twice in his career. Not that impressive. His playoff numbers, 248 postseason batting average, 4 home runs and over 200 career at-bats, and a 325 career slugging percentage in the playoffs. So, yeah, he has rings, but like I give a lot of those credits to good teams, Madison Bumgardner, well coached, and as the catcher, you are valued more for some other of your intangibles, and I don't want to take that away from him. And I feel like because he's not been very good for a while now, that changes some things. But he's a guy that I feel like for a lot of times when we watch him like in fantasy baseball drafts, he's still drafted way too early, and he's more name than anything. And I do want to say that part of this has to do with the injury that he sustained. He's definitely seen his career go negative since then. But the 325 career postseason slugging percentage, that's not good.
It's not. You're definitely not wrong about that. He is a first ballot Hall of Famer, though, in my opinion. For the rings, the MVP season he had. He's not a great power hitter. He never was. No. But he's one of the better hitting catchers, just in terms of hitting, that I've ever seen, especially when he was in his prime. Again, he's got multiple rings. Yeah, I'm a big Posey fan, so I disagree with this one.
Yeah, I thought that you would, and that's why I made sure that I could validate it with a bunch of statistics to go along with it. And I wanted to really look into his postseason numbers because along with those rings, I remember Pablo Sandoval hitting 3 home runs. I remember Madison Bumgardner. Nobody needed to do anything because Bumgardner was painting corners like you would never see before.
Who was Bumgardner going to, though? I think that you have to give a lot of credit to Posey for that. I mean, look at the staff. Go ahead.
Yeah, I get that. And was it the catcher calling the game? Or was it the pitcher painting the corners? I can't really tell you 100%. And I knew you would disagree with it. And that's why I looked into his postseason numbers a lot.
When you hear people in the game talk about Buster Posey, they talk about him as like a first ballot Hall of Famer. Does that mean anything to you?
Sure. When I hear people talk about in the football game, they talk about Jeff Fisher as being a great coach, and he's not.
Well, so that's how you compare it?
I don't disvalue. I'm just saying, like, oftentimes, like, we hear, because they might like a guy. They're like, oh, I like him. And Buster Posey is a good baseball player. But you do hear people, I don't think he's as good as some people think he is. Now, there's a whole other fraction of people that probably agree with me. And I know you're a big fan. I know there's a lot of people that agree with you. And I don't discount your points because I do think they're valid. And that's why I spent a lot of time looking into him. Like for me, like with Derek Jeter, I didn't have to look anything up. I knew it. I knew all these things. With Buster Posey, I wanted to check and go back and look at a lot of what he did in the postseason. And offensively, he's played a lot. He has not been good offensively. And would Madison Bumgardner done those things without him? Neither one of us can prove it one way or the other.
He is the common link, though, between all those teams. And, you know, it's not even just that you hear about it. Even still, like, I think that's the reason that Buster Posey still hits, third for the Giants? I know that they don't have any other options, but...
yeah, because their team's pathetic.
He's, you know, and there is something to be said, like, it is similar to Derek Jeter. Just in the sense that, like, the Giants have 3 rings in his career. I mean, I think he's got to get at least some credit for that. I'll say this, he's got 4 top 15 MVP finishes with 3 top 10. Obviously, he won the one. He's a 7-time All-Star, only the 1 Gold Glove. But, I mean, for me, he's not overrated, but I'm a big Posey fan. You knew this.
Yeah, I knew you would not agree with me, and that was one of the reasons was easier for me to put him on the list, was it gave us something to talk about. We're going to agree on a lot of these, and it's fun not to agree on some of them.
I wasn't expecting you to go there.
Yeah, and I didn't think that you would. So that's why I spent more time looking him up than I did Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis, who I knew that we've had these conversations before, and I wanted to throw something out there. And again, how do you rate Buster Posey? Because he's a guy that there are a lot of people that are going to be like, he's just not that good anymore. And so they don't think of him as being that good. There are still people. When I watch him being drafted in round 6 of fantasy drafts, I'm like, what are you smoking to draft him that early? Like, the guy hits maybe 7 home runs this year. He's going to bat 280. Like, you can pick that up off the waiver wire.
For sure. And he's definitely fallen off. And that, you know, hurts his case. No doubt about that.
All right. Who do you got next?
So I only have a couple left because, you know, a couple of ours were duplicated.
I got 4 left.
I only have 2 left because I also had Jeter and Bryce Harper. And I think there was one more. So why don't you go again?
Okay. So let's move over to football. Oh, I just realized I got a couple of guys that have a common link in history. This is another one. How do you interpret it? This is one that I will have a lot of people who agree with me. I'm going to get a lot of people who are going to say, no, he's not even rated, so don't think about him. And then there's going to be the 25% of people that only look at wins that I think he should be a Hall of Famer. That's Eli Manning, who is nothing more than an average quarterback at best with a big name that happened to get 2 Super Bowl rings because of one lucky throw, 1 great throw to Manningham, and then really, really good defenses backing him up.
It's hard for me. Like, I don't disagree that Eli Manning's like, I hate the, he only won because of this, though, because that happens in all games. And you win, either you win or you lose, not because, you know, the guy jumped in the stands or because because that happens with every team.
But those things happen.
They did. But I think if you're picking them out, you are picking out exactly what you want to pick out.
Sure. And you could do that with every single player both ways all the time.
Sure.
Though. And that's why you and I pick these things out. You go back to the first one against the Patriots when they knocked off the undefeated Patriots team. On that drive, Asante Samuel should have ended the game. Next up, Eli Manning escapes, throws a ball up into the middle of nowhere. That's going to be picked off 9 out of 10 times. Game over. You know what I mean? If anything that's normal happens on those 2 plays, then nobody's looked at him and he's looked at as a total bust. This is a guy that led the league in interceptions multiple times. He's been turnover prone. One of the only, other than those 2 Super Bowl rings, the only thing I can really say about him that's good, he's almost always available.
Part of Eli Manning is overrated, and part of him is underrated because the only problem I have with, you know, the plays you're talking about is no one else was able to beat the Patriots. but he got it done. Especially that year they were undefeated. Got to give credit where credit is due. I think a lot of people view it like you do. He's never done anything. Like he's been more or less bad, below average. I don't know.
I wanted to talk about him because it goes back to the point I talk about posting videos and reading social media comments. It is a polarizing discussion because there are a lot of people that like he's a no doubt first ballot Hall of Famer, 2 rings. I'm like, cool. But wins over replacement from like a baseball perspective, you don't think that half of the quarterbacks in the league might have been able to win a ring with that defense?
Yeah, but you can't that's subjective thinking,
Sure, but this whole list is subjective, though.
He is a Hall of Famer, though. Like that's not. I mean, he will make.
Not to me, he's not.
He will make the Hall of Fame, though.
Probably, he's got a big name, but if his last name was Newton, I'm not sure that he would.
Maybe. Man, it's hard though. No one else was able to beat the Patriots except he did it.
Nick Foles beat the Patriots.
Yeah, not the same Patriots team though.
Brady and Belichick. Again, they beat the undefeated Patriots, but let's not pretend like it wasn't the defense holding an all-time great offense to 14, was it? 17-14, was that the final score?
I can't remember.
All right, it was a low-scoring game. I mean, I still remember Tom Brady, oh, you think we're only going to score 14? or whatever, good luck with that. And then they did or something like that. I forget the exact numbers, but it's close. So he's another one. A lot of these guys, it depends on how you rate them and where you look. There are a lot of people that think Eli Manning is like one of the best quarterbacks ever because he won his 2 rings. And how many quarterbacks have 2 rings? But
people really think that?
Oh my God. I read so many social media comments as I post videos places. I see it everywhere.
Well,
I couldn't agree. Yeah. And again, all right. Who do you got next?
So kind of in that same mold, I think this guy is overrated. He does have a Super Bowl ring, and that's Joe Flacco. So very similar. You could basically say the same thing, except for I think that he was carried even more by a great defense. Not as good as Eli Manning.
He played well in that game. I want to give him credit for that. But other than that, no, I don't think he's that good.
No. Again, just a guy that I thought was overrated, but it's hard. And again, this falls into the whole when we were making our underrated video, and I said this, with the age of social media, when guys have big names and they stink, you hear about it now. Like everything that's going on is out there the second it happens. So it's hard for guys to be too overrated or underrated anymore.
No doubt about it. I couldn't agree with you anymore. I wouldn't have really thought about him. Although, you know what? I'm not lying. I did actually consider him. But I wasn't sure how people rated him. I feel like there's a lot of neutral opinion on him where I don't hear one thing or the other. So I didn't really think about that. But if you just want to talk about, oh, he's a Super Bowl champion quarterback, so is Trent Dilfer.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything to me necessarily. So I don't know.
Well,
I thought about it, but
ESPN had an article about Joe Flacco's brother like last week. It was their cover story. And the cover was something to the effect of, can he be elite too? Like basically calling Joe Flacco elite. So that's kind of where that came into my head.
Do you remember the good old days when not everything was elite in sports before that word got like put in to be like the litmus test and you had to hear about it all the time?
It's so annoying.
All right. So I feel like quarterbacks is going to be a little bit of a theme for the last part. And I'm about to drop some polarizing conversation for my fellow Packer fans. Overrated, Brett Favre.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier in the video. Why don't you explain why you think he's overrated?
Well, I brought him up.
You said it just in passing.
Okay.
I can't remember why.
I was 10 or 11 years old when Brett Favre first played for the Packers. And the Packers had gone through, after being, one of the most storied NFL franchises and being dominant throughout the early days of the NFL, went through about 2 decades of mediocrity at best. So Don Majkowski came in, had a nice year or two, like making the playoffs was like a big deal for Green Bay back then. Obviously, a lot of you guys who are younger won't remember all this, but then Brett Favre came in, and he was impressive. Same argument with Eli Manning. One of his best abilities was availability, but a lot of times he played through injuries and hurt his team. And this comes from a guy who, for a long time, was one of the biggest Brett Favre fans in the world. Now I've had the ability to watch a quarterback for the last 15 years. And when people bring it up in Packers circles, who's better, Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre? Like, I don't even think it's that close of a conversation. They both offer the same elite upside of turning bad offenses into good offenses. But Brett Favre, touchdowns to interceptions, not even 2-1. Aaron Rodgers better to 4-1. Do you know how many games the Packers would have been right there or won if Brett Favre didn't make stupid throws and throw interceptions at key moments? It was a big part of what he did. When he won all those MVPs, he was very, very, very good. But he also played for a loaded team that was well coached. People forget how great those Green Bay defenses were in the mid-'90s with Reggie White, Gilbert Brown, Sean Jones, Leroy Butler, Newsome, a collection of quality linebackers that went along with it, Doug Evans playing up in the second corner. They were good. The year that the Packers won the Super Bowl, I think they limited the opposing offenses to like 12 and a half, 13 points a game. They were really good. Now, Brett Favre was always put into good positions, and he was great back in those days. But there was a lot of years of his career, he just wasn't that good. Again, some people don't rate him that high. But for people who put him in like the best 5 quarterbacks ever, you're just wrong. One, I'll take Aaron Rodgers over him. But Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, John Elway, Joe Montana, I might even put Drew Brees ahead of Brett Favre.
He's top 10 for me, though.
That would be tough because I can't speak on guys like Johnny Unitas, who I never saw play. So that would be, or even Bart Starr,
I take Steve.
Yeah, I think I would too. This comes from, again, I was one of the biggest Brett Favre supporters and fans and excuse makers for a really long time. But having the ability to watch every single play that Aaron Rodgers has played since then, I don't even really think it's that close. Aaron Rodgers does not beat you with moron interceptions over and over and over and over and over again. Favre just did. He cost a lot of games with stupid throws.
Yeah, he's got that kind
Jameis Winston.
But he does have like Brett Favre. He's a name that people love, and he's got that going for him. When you look at any of these like overrated lists, though, he's always high up on it.
Yeah. Again, longevity gives you a lot of career statistics that have all now really been passed by Manning and Brady because the way the NFL has changed, where you throw so much. Like, when he was passing Marino, it was because of his longevity. But now these guys have been around for a long time too, but have been in a new type of NFL. Also, like, when Brady passes them, Brady has like half the interceptions Brett Favre has. And again, that's Tom Brady, one of the greatest of all time. So it's hard to put you up there. But for people who put Favre in like their top 5, like, no, he's not.
I agree. Still a great quarterback, though.
Sure. And I was blessed to have him as quarterback my franchise for 15 plus years or whatever exactly it was. And he was still good. But he made a lot of bad decisions, and he did not always rise in big moments. And I don't want to like poo-poo all the times we lost in Dallas and he didn't play great because those Dallas teams were great in the mid-'90s. But, you take outside of that run, he definitely had some bad years. Never once led the league in quarterback rating or anything like that.
Yeah, and definitely the interceptions hurt his cause. There's no doubt about that.
There are very few things that will what's the word I'm looking for? Translate to winning percentage in the NFL besides turnover ratio. And his turnover ratio sucks.
You're right. It was never good. He was always a guy that would throw it up. That's also part of the reason people love him.
Yeah, and that's fun to watch. But I could think of 2 major playoff games where they lost simply because he just ran to the right and threw the ball into the middle of the field. One for Minnesota and the 4th and 26 game against Philadelphia that we had in the bag. We get into overtime, and he just chucks it up into the middle of the field and it gets picked. No rhyme or reason to it all whatsoever.
That's so frustrating.
All right, who do you got next?
So this is my last one, and this is kind of I'm going to take a different route for this one. I'm going to go with a guy that was supposed to be amazing for the Browns. Wasn't an awful NFL player. I could actually put 2 guys here, but I'm going with Braylon Edwards. Again, it's hard for a guy like that to be too overrated because he didn't pan out what he was supposed to be. But when we drafted Braylon Edwards, I mean, when I tell you I was like almost as happy as when we drafted LeBron, I'm not kidding. He's a guy I loved coming out of Michigan. I thought he was going to be the best receiver in football. And at times, he showed that upside.
Just give that one good year, right?
He could never put it together, never really found his fit in the league. And again, this list is so subjective. So you could easily sit there and be like, Braylon Edwards, how is he overrated? No one even thinks about him. He's not rated at all. Well, there was a time when he was very much overrated. He was the third pick of the Browns overall in that draft and came in with a ton of hype. And I didn't want to just, our busts, guys that busted out overrated. Like, is Jamarcus Russell overrated? Maybe. It's a fun conversation to have.
Yeah, he had the one great year in 2007, 1,289 yards and 16 touchdowns. It was just he was nothing other than that.
Yeah, he just was nothing.
He had 40 career touchdowns and almost half of them coming in 1 year.
Yeah.
So not a guy I would have thought of, but again, this list is totally subjective and there's so many different ways to look at it. So we're going to get to the last two. Again, no chance that you're going to talk about or think I'm going to either of these guys. One, I know you will not agree with me, but I want to start with Brian Urlacher. And I want to kind of give you a little bit of the background about how I learned about this or what my thoughts are on this one. Because during Brian Urlacher's heydays, I was mostly living in Minneapolis at the time. And this was, I didn't have satellite radio. The internet was, clearly around, but we didn't spend as much time on it. There was no DFS. So you listen to more sports radio on, driving around and stuff like this. This is when I was selling windows and siding for a long time too. So I'm living in Minnesota.
Sports radio.
Yeah. So Matt Burke, Harvard graduate, center, very good NFL player. I'm sure you remember the name. Yeah. Played center for Minnesota for a long time. So one day I was listening to him talk, and he was telling the local guy, the K-fan, that he thinks Brian Urlacher is the most overrated NFL player of all time. And he talked about how when they established a game plan to attack the Chicago Bears, he goes, we run right at Brian Urlacher because he can't shed blocks the way people think he can. He's very good side to side because he's extremely fast. And he's, even by linebacker standards, he's extremely fast. So he goes, he's good there. We don't try to run around him. He goes, but we run right at him, and it's the game plan every time we go up against them. So I'm like, really? Brian Urlacher? He's really good because he kind of jumps off your TV screen because he's so fast. And he's making a lot of these quick plays and stuff like that. But then I started watching what Matt Burke was talking about. I heard other Vikings offensive linemen on these radio shows talk about it, run right at Urlacher. And I started noticing what they were talking about. He's a lot of numbers, a lot of flash. And again, he's still a very good football player. But he's not on the Ray Lewis level. And I want to make sure that we differentiate. He's more London Fletcher than he is Ray Lewis. He's not even Patrick Willis.
But it though sounds like he sucks. Like we're going to
suck, right. There are people that think he's Ray Lewis level. Like Ray Lewis is here, Brian Urlacher is here. Let's not pretend that they're the same guy. And because their careers intertwined, it was kind of like if all of a sudden people started saying Tom Brady and Matt Ryan are the same because their passing yardage is the same. Like, no, they're not. Tom Brady and Matt Ryan are not the same. Matt Ryan's good, but Tom Brady is great. Just like Ray Lewis was great, but Brian Urlacher was very good. But a lot of people, especially here in the upper Midwest, being an NFC North guy, they used to think this guy was so good, and he was a good player, but he was not as great as some people thought he was.
I think he's on the next level up from London Fletcher, but he's not as good as Ray Lewis. Agreed wholeheartedly.
Okay, so football is often tough for us as fans to watch and interpret it, right?
Like offensive line. Yeah, it's very hard.
I watch as much football as...
Sorry to interrupt you, but scheme means a lot. Like who these guys are scheming to go after and how numbers of tackles can get built up. So I'm with you 100%.
Think about our conversation last year with Khalil Mack. And we talked about once, like the lineman, Akeem Hicks. Once he was out and the teams would specifically scheme to just stop Khalil Mack, he had a nothing season by comparison. Like when you're a wide receiver, are you a number 2 guy in one-on-one coverage all day? Or are you Antonio Brown in his heyday or Julio Jones who beats double coverage routinely and things like that? Like, again, we watch a lot of fantasy and play a lot of DFS. Availability and opportunity are not the same as talent.
So true.
So that was, again, I had to go off of what I heard other people say, other NFL players, and then I started looking at it a little bit more. That's where I came up with Brian Urlacher. And it's still tough with linebackers because they put up numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough to evaluate that way. Okay. All right. Last one up. You ready to disagree, Greg?
Yeah, I'm nervous for this one. Who you got?
Big Ben Roethlisberger.
I thought about him, I don't agree with you, but I don't think it's like crazy. Like, I do not think Buster Posey is overrated at all. Like, I don't think so. But like, I could see why you think Roethlisberger. Listen, I don't think he's overrated, but I think he's a big, like, he needs another ring to really solidify himself, in my opinion. But if he gets another ring, he might go down as top 10 all time. I was just hearing like First Taker, one of those shows, talk about this. Go ahead.
So my things with Big Ben is it goes back to winning is easy to equate with NBA players, almost impossible with baseball players. And even with football players, you can give some credit to quarterbacks, but oftentimes still it's too much or too little, right? It can be very subjective. Big Ben has 2 rings.
Quarterbacks are the closest thing in sports to NBA players, in my opinion.
Agreed. I agree with you 1,000% on that. However, you look at guys like an Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady. Aaron Rodgers is regularly put into a shitty position. Tom Brady's put in a great position. So if you looked at just rings 6-1, you would think Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. When the truth of the matter is, even if you like Brady better, it's a lot closer than that.
For sure.
Okay. Peyton Manning, Dan Marino, John Elway, we can throw all these guys into a similar conversation. They're all really, really great. And we can never truly know what John Elway would have done under Bill Belichick.
Mm-mm.
Can't. So with Ben Roethlisberger, he's got 2 rings. Correct me if I'm wrong. 3 trips to the Super Bowl, right?
Yes.
Because he lost to my Packers.
Yep.
I'm not missing a 4th, right?
That game was just on, too.
Yeah, it was. So
he's been to 3. He's won 2. They beat Arizona, and they beat.
So I want to talk about the 2 that he won. They beat Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle.
He was terrible in that game. So he gets a ring because that defense was great and because they had that freak play from Antoine Randall L to Hines Ward. Willie Parker had I think he had a long run. And it was the only reason. Oh, and also the touchdown sneak wasn't even a touchdown. So like that could have changed the outcome of the game. He gets a ring doing very, very little to help that team. So you can't take the ring away from him, but I don't think he gets a ton of credit for that one. And I think most people would agree.
But are they in that game without him?
Sure. I feel like you could have put most quarterbacks on that team and they would have been in that game.
You feel like that, but
not Jamarcus Russell, but Tony Romo, Matt Ryan, Cam Newton. I mean, all these guys put them in a better position to win that game easier, probably. Because he was young, and I'll give him that. It was his first year being a starting quarterback. I didn't think you're going to put everything onto him. I just don't give him much credit for that ring because I feel like if you look at like the wins over replacement type of statistic, I think most quarterbacks in the league win that ring.
Okay, I get that.
Whether that's 16 or 25, that's up for debate. Okay. So the next one was the ring that he got against Arizona in a very close game. And I do want to stop the Big Ben bashing and say that the game-winning drive that he orchestrated, including hitting Santonio Holmes, good pass, great catch. I mean, that he deserves credit for that. And I don't want to completely take that game away from him. But outside of the one drive, he did very little to help his team win that game. They scored 13 points offensively outside of that against a not very good Arizona defense. You got to give a lot of credit to James Harrison for the pick 6. Incredible return on that situation. And Arizona didn't capitalize in a couple of situations that they could have in that game. So again, I cannot take that drive away from him. I mean, he deserves a lot of credit and a pat on the back for that one. Okay, his 3rd Super Bowl against the Packers. They got back into the game because of Rashard Mendenhall running very well in the backfield. He did very little to help them win in that game. When it came down to it, when rubber had to beat the road, he wasn't great in a lot of those drives against that one. So, yes, he's been to the Super Bowl 3 times and has 2 wins. But that's more to me about the Steelers franchise and the great defense and good coaching that happened to come through in those games. He's had some big numbers for fantasy, but throwing to Antonio Brown, as crazy as that dude has gotten, Antonio Brown can beat triple coverage and get open on almost every single play. Le'Veon Bell was a game changer back in the day, dumping the ball off to him and letting him do all the work. So it depends on how you rate Big Ben again, and people rate him differently. But for those of you
who you rate him,
I mean, to me, he's like on the Matt Ryan level.
No.
Yeah.
No way. That's just no way. Matt Ryan's made 1 Super Bowl and completely collapsed. Whatever you say about Big Ben, he has 2 rings.
Sure. But if you put Matt Ryan in that situation.
But you don't know that, though.
I don't know that.
But I'm saying he's got 2 rings. And then your next statement is, but There is no but. He's got 2 rings.
So, but then it's like, so Robert Horry has 7 rings? Okay.
But it's not, you can't take that comparison. Ben Roethlisberger, he might not have been perfect in those games, but they still got it done, and he was the quarterback. So for better or for worse, the quarterback still gets the credit.
So why can't Joe Flacco get more credit for how good the Ravens have been, like, routinely for all those years?
Joe Flacco gets credit. I think he does get credit. He just never, and I've seen a lot of these quarterbacks that are in my division, he doesn't change the game the way Big Ben does. He wasn't undefeated against the state of Ohio when he played here throughout his entire career like Big Ben was. Big Ben was like the guy that, I mean, if Big Ben gets another ring, in my opinion, he's a top 10 quarterback of all time. Right now, I think he's like a top 20 quarterback of all time. Definitely way ahead of like the Matt Ryans of the world, just for his resume. I mean, Matt Ryan's never won anything. So I get it. Like, he can put up numbers, but he's never won anything.
Yeah. Definitely was not impressed by his second half performance against New England in that one Super Bowl. They should have won that one, but man, did they choke that second half.
We talk about this all the time, for better or for worse. Like, if Atlanta does win that game, even in overtime, then you're right. I do put Matt Ryan right on the Ben Roethlisberger train tier. And it's hard, because you're right. Like, Ben Roethlisberger wasn't like the reason they won, but they won. And that's just sports, though, and for better or for worse. And I know that that's shitty, but that's just what it is.
So that's one of the interesting parts about sports is because athletes, when it comes to championships, have such a short shelf life that the examples are so small that you never really get a good test. Because you're talking about 1 or 2 games that are freak coincidence and a ball bounces this way. And it's like all of a sudden, like with Tom Brady is the best example because he's got 9 Super Bowl trips. He's gone 6-3, but he's a couple of balls bouncing away from being 2-7 in Super Bowls. He's also a couple of balls bouncing away from being a perfect 9-0. Like, imagine the difference on maybe, like, honestly, Tom Brady being 9-0 and 2-7 comes down to about 10 plays.
And the other thing is, and I said this when you brought up Roethlisberger, like, I don't think he's overrated. But I understand why, because of all the reasons you mentioned. The other thing, and I think the biggest point for Roethlisberger, why you could say he's overrated, I heard it might have been Max Kellerman. Say what you will about Mike Tomlin, but the Steelers have never been below 500 since he's been there. Even last year, they were 500. So what does Ben Roethlisberger really add to that? What's Pittsburgh usually with Roethlisberger? 10-6, 11-5. It's not like, amazing, but it's still 2 to 3 wins better than, the average quarterback.
So, and you also, like, again, this is where, like, you being an AFC North guy and a Cleveland guy, like, I'm just not impressed by beating Cincinnati and Cleveland. I don't care how many times you do it. Like, I kind of feel like most people, if they played for a great organization like the Steelers, which is a great organization, would maybe not be undefeated, but would have a really high winning percentage against those 2 helpless franchises. So I'm just not a big deal for me. Again, that's where, like, for me, being an NFC North guy, it was more fun for me to talk about Brett Favre and Brian Urlacher because I've watched them play a lot.
No doubt about it. Okay, I just want to hear, out of those quarterbacks in that draft, Eli Manning, Rivers, and Roethlisberger, rank them.
Damn. Are we talking legacy, or if, like, I had to redraft right now and, like, I'm a GM and I have to get them, or am I talking legacy or career? Like, how am I ranking them?
I mean, legacy, I think on who you would play with. Legacy career, Rivers is last because he has no rings, and the other 2 are very close.
Okay, so I'm drafting right now. I've watched these guys all play for 15 years, and I'm a GM of any random team, and I have to tell you what order I would pick them in?
At their best.
I think the number one thing to say is it's really, really close. And it would probably, for me, go Ben, Rivers, Eli.
Same.
But the conversation's very, very, very close. Because if you told me that Phillip Rivers went to the Steelers, a significantly better run franchise, and he was heads and shoulders better than those other 2, I'm like, I can listen to that conversation. I don't know if I agree with you, but I can't argue you so much. And what to say? Same goes for Eli. I don't look at the Giants as like this great organization, at least not offensively. And if he went to Pittsburgh, because for me, the best franchise of that group is Pittsburgh by a huge difference. And that's where we talk about player development. Like, that makes a big difference.
No doubt. I also would have Ben first there. Like, I would have the same as you.
But it's super close, right?
It is. It is close. No doubt.
Although I do think the easiest decision for me to make is Eli last.
It fits pretty well for me because I have Big Ben first and I have Eli last, even though they're all very close.
Yeah, for me, it's like Ben, Phillip, Eli. But I think it's a great question. Really, really good question. Because even though he's got the 2 rings, I don't think anybody who's watched football for 15 years can't say that they don't think Phillip Rivers is a better quarterback at his prime than Eli Manning.
The other thing about Ben, which is the reason I put Ben up there as one of the top, right now, top 20 ever, is his ability to move in the pocket.
Yes.
It's amazing. He doesn't get brought down. It's amazing. And that transcends him over those other guys pretty easily for me.
Yeah, the name Big Ben is no joke. He's big. No. He is hard to take down. He's a big dude.
He's a guy like you talked about. Like, you want him on your team for that last drive, regardless of how he's played in the game before that. At least I do.
He's fearless.
Mm-hmm.
And while that will cost you games, sometimes give me a guy who's not scared. And that's one thing Brett Favre had. Mm-hmm. He wasn't scared to try to win. There are people who come up small because they are scared to go for it.
A lot of people.
Yes. And so then you get the question. So if with 10 examples, do you want the guy that's going to win you 3 games by himself because he'll grab his cojones and just go for it, but he might also cost you 4 or 5 times? Or you want the guy that's sometimes like LeBron, like the knock in his career from time to time is like he's trying to make the right basketball play. Mm-hmm. And then you watch Kobe, you're like, well, Kobe will take it and shoot it. Yeah, but he missed it almost every time. Cool, he wasn't scared to shoot it, but he always misses.
I remember LeBron, when you say that, I remember when they, one of the first series when they played at Detroit, they were down 1 or down 2, and LeBron was going to the lane and kicked it out to Danielle Marshall, who had a wide open 3 and missed it. And LeBron got exactly what you just said.
Skip Bayless was all over him, stands on the mattress. Oh, Michael would have taken it. Okay, but Michael might have probably missed it. As great as Michael Jordan is, and we remember all these great shots against Utah and Cleveland and stuff like that, he missed way more than he took as far as those game winners. We never talk about those anymore because he's Michael Jordan. You can't say anything negative about it. I told you I got really big into the history of sports over the last couple of weeks because I'm bored out of my gourd. And watching some of these breakdowns of some of these Michael Jordan finals games and all these shots that he missed where then the rebound was gotten and kicked out to Paxson. We never remember those. Oh, Michael won it. Michael won it. Michael won it. Yeah, because Steve Kerr and John Paxson hit major shots at key points to win the game. But we don't remember that 15, 20 years later.
No, you're so right about that.
Well, 2025 is more realistic at this point.
We definitely have selective memories, no doubt,
sure.
as people.
And Kobe's the same way. Kobe is – I love his mentality. I think Mamba mentality is a great talking point. He is as fearless as they come, just as a human being. You just have the utmost respect for his ability to work harder than everybody else out there, which I think is an enviable skill because you want to know what? I can't be 6'9" and run like that. But you want to know what? You can always get up early and work harder, and that's what Kobe did. But let's not pretend like Kobe didn't sit on the sidelines and pout, shoot too much, and then refuse to shoot, miss the playoffs multiple times. He had 3 rings because he got to play with Shaq. It was as dominant as anybody we've ever seen. Not saying that he doesn't get some credit for those because he made some big shots and came through big time in the 4th quarter. But when everybody's trying to stop Shaq, your job's a little bit easier.
Yeah, definitely. Now especially because of what happened, the lore of Kobe, no one will ever bring up that stuff. But
for sure,
it's very true. I remember in one of his first playoff series, he took he shot an air ball, and I remember him there was at the beginning of his career, he wasn't even getting that much run.
Yeah, so you're right because of what happened. Rest in peace. People won't talk about that, but I do want to tell you that is the thing which doesn't make me rail on Kobe harder, not right now, but even back in the day, was because, nobody works harder than that guy. And that's what I think is one of the most enviable traits to have.
I was just looking at a picture a couple days ago of right after Kobe, like the first picture of Kobe, like after they lost the title to the Celtics, was him like reading the paper with like already in the training room that had like Paul Pierce wins MVP of the finals, and like Kobe's just reading it. That's the type of guy he is.
For sure, because you want to know what? Like me and you will never be LeBron James, right? I am never going to be 6'9", run like a cheetah, have that kind of, LeBron James intelligence is off the hook too. Like I think I'm a smart guy, but I can never be brilliant at something the way that he is. But you want to know what? We can all wake up in the morning and work as hard as you possibly can. And that's what Kobe did, which again, I know some people might think that's backhanded compliment. It's not. I think that is the one thing that we can all do is work super, super hard every day. And he did that, which again, kudos.
Well, I think that's the point, is that he did that, but he was also like as talented as like the best of the best. Maybe he wasn't as good as Jordan or LeBron, but like, don't say that to people who are Kobe fans. That's all.
No, well, I mean, he's several inches shorter than LeBron. He's not built like LeBron.
No.
Like he had to jump shooting is a learned skill.
He's way more of a scorer than LeBron is.
For sure. But you have to, learn those things and teach yourself those things. Like there's a difference between natural talent and just putting the work in the gym. Not saying LeBron doesn't work because he's clearly a worker, but there are other guys who are just freak athletes, that just get into it. And that's like, you talk about like a guy like Giannis. Everybody thinks Giannis, like they remember this guy, but did you see pictures of Giannis when his arms used to look like this pen right here? Like he put the work in the gym to be a freak athlete, not just a fast guy who can jump. He put on 50 pounds of muscle since getting into the NBA. He's at the gym till 2 a.m. He is not a natural shooter.
Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, he's a beast.
And you compare him to like some of the guys on your list, like Karl-Anthony Towns. Imagine if he put that kind of work in.
Yeah, exactly. Who's much more skilled than Giannis. I mean,
imagine Towns with Kobe's work ethic.
Right? Like that isn't it. If you ask, Karl-Anthony Towns is just more skilled than Giannis. It's not even a question.
Yeah. If you give Karl-Anthony Towns Kobe Bryant's work ethic, I mean, he'd be the best ever.
One of them, no doubt.
Yeah, right up there, right? But he just doesn't have it. That's the problem with that Timberwolves culture. And that's another thing that we talked about with player development. Like, what would be different if Karl-Anthony Towns ended up under Greg Popovich on the Spurs?
I was just thinking the Spurs, exactly.
Like, where would his career have gone? I think it's one of the most underrated things that people don't talk about enough in sports is player development and the organization that you had fortunate enough to go to.
I do think, though, in like the NBA, when you're like the superstar like that, though, like, I get it, and you're not wrong, but like, it's his franchise now. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's his. Like,
it is.
Change it. You know what I mean? Like,
sure, but like, we don't all get blessed with the same mentors.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
you know what? Just because he's this good at basketball doesn't mean that he wants to be that guy. Maybe he just, that for better or for worse, they're people. And Towns seems very like soft-spoken, etc.
Yes. So I've done a lot of sales. I know you've done some sales, and I've often made the comparison to like an athlete, and especially a quarterback, because you get way too much credit, good or bad. Like a lot of times, if you work for a good sales organization with a great sales manager and good people around you, selling's easy. The product sells itself. You got people around to back you up and support you. If you work for a place that's awful, it doesn't matter how good you are. The negativity around there, the lack of leadership, the lack of a mentor, the bad products, it will weigh on you and make things really, really difficult. So either way, you get way too much credit for your success and your failure.
And like with anything else, though, there's always outliers, right? Yeah. There'll always be guys like in your scenario at the really good company that sucks still just because they can't sell. Or like the best of the best can sell anything. So a few people will be able to do that. But you're so right. I agree with your point wholeheartedly.
Yeah, Michael Jordan was going to be great no matter who drafted him. But that's Michael Jordan. He's the GOAT, right?
Exactly.
It's an outlier.
Precisely. Agreed.
No doubt about it. And we've worked with those types of people before. I mean, even not just in sales, but at everybody's job. We've worked with those people. It doesn't matter. I worked with this guy named Jeremy Griffin, I think I was pronounced him. And we did advertising sales together. And the product was shit. I didn't have much love for the organization or anything like that. And honestly, the dude was not smooth in the slightest. But you want to know what? His numbers were always there because he grew up with that farm type of mentality that he was the first one in the office. He was making the most calls. He was pounding on the most doors. And it doesn't matter if he wasn't the most talented or anything like that. He put in the work and got the numbers because of him.
Yeah, and that means a lot, man. It's always, I don't want to say always, but more often than not comes down to hard work.
For sure. I mean, I can tell you right now, I was probably a smoother talker than he was, but he kicked the crap out of me. Why? He worked harder at it. I didn't like what I was selling, and I didn't try hard enough. He beat my butt. Despite all the opportunities I was probably blessed with ahead of him, he kicked my butt up and down the street.
It's funny.
So, all right, I think we've rambled on long enough. Appreciate you all watching if anybody's still here.
Thanks, guys.